My husband hired an actress to pretend to be the daughter I lost in childbirth. She called me mom, cried in my arms, and moved into my home. I gave her everything. But what they didn't expect is that I'd adopt her for real, then use her to destroy the man who plotted it all. My husband. You're not going to believe me. But please, before you scroll away, just hear me out. If someone told you your dead daughter was standing at your doorstep after 34 years, what would you do? You wouldn't ask for her ID. You'd open your arms and let yourself believe in miracles, wouldn't you? That's exactly what I did. And it nearly cost me everything. My name is Teresa Alden. I'm 59. And what I'm about to tell you is the most insane, manipulative, and deliciously twisted revenge story of my life. My daughter, Emily, died during childbirth. That's what they told me in 1989. I was barely 24, and I'd lost so much blood I never even saw her face. Just the scream of a nurse, then silence. My husband back then abandoned me soon after. I built my life back piece by piece, eventually marrying Leonard Alden, a charming, silver-tongued real estate developer. We were married 19 years. I thought he was loyal. I thought he loved me. But Leonard, he had been planning something behind my back that made even betrayal look polite. You ever cry so hard your face goes numb? That was me the night she showed up. Rain pouring, heart racing, and there she was, soaked and shaking, holding a tiny, broken music box I hadn't seen since 1989. She looked straight into my eyes and said, "You gave this to me when I was born." And just like that, the past came roaring through me like a freight train with no brakes. I'm Teresa Alden. I'm 59. And 34 years ago, I gave birth to a baby girl who never came home. The hospital told me she was stillborn. They never let me hold her. Never let me name her. And after the blood transfusions and morphine wore off, all I had left was a silent room and an aching, hollow place in my chest where my daughter should have been. I buried her in memory. I moved on. I married Leonard. I never talked about her again until that night. Her name was Emily, or so she claimed. And the second she said the words, I think you're my mother, my knees gave out. I don't even remember falling. Just Leonard's arms catching me from behind and the sound of the music box playing those familiar, tinkling notes from my youth. Emily looked so much like me it hurt. Same green eyes. Same tiny dimple on her left cheek. I wanted to believe her so badly it made my bones tremble. I invited her in. We wrapped her in towels. Leonard made tea. And while the storm raged outside, my husband and I sat across from the girl who claimed to be the child I lost, and I let myself hope. She had paperwork. A hospital file. A faded photo with a nurse's signature. She said she was adopted, raised in Oregon, found me through DNA records and hospital archives. And when she handed me a printed page from a genealogy site, one that linked her to my maiden name, I wept. Leonard stayed quiet. He rubbed my shoulder and said, "If it's true, this is a miracle." And for a moment, I believed we were all in this together. But I didn't know then what I know now, that Leonard wasn't surprised because he already knew. He wasn't stunned because he was the one who hired her. At the time, I let Emily stay in our guest room. We spent hours catching up on what was never real. She asked me about lullabies. About what her name would have been if I'd kept her. We baked cookies. She cried in my arms. She called me mom. And every time she did, something inside me healed. Leonard started suggesting legal steps. What if something happened to you, Teresa? She's your daughter. We should add her to the house title. Just for protection. I didn't argue. I was too blinded by joy. But even in the middle of my happiness, something kept whispering, it's too perfect. Too easy. Too soon. The way Leonard pushed the documents on the kitchen table with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The way he watched us, not like a proud father, but like a man watching a game unfold exactly as planned. And then came the moment that shattered the illusion. I found the contract. It was tucked behind the lining of Leonard's old leather briefcase. I was cleaning the closet, looking for an extra charger. But instead, I found the truth. A printed contract. Actress agreement, role, Emily. Details of payment. Behavioral notes. Even a timeline. My breath stopped. My hands went ice cold. That night, I stood over them both as they laughed on the patio, him sipping whiskey, her twirling in one of my old scarves, and I realized I was the joke. The fool. The target. But instead of screaming, I smiled. Because in that moment, I made a different plan. If this broke your heart even a little, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. It helps more than you know. And tell me, where are you from? I'd love to know who's listening. The paper was crinkled. Coffee-stained. The signature smudged, but it was all there. The words didn't even make sense at first. Role, Emily, age 32, purpose, emotional integration. Emotional integration. What did that mean? My brain kept skipping over it. But the more I read, the more everything inside me froze. Leonard had hired this woman. Hired her like you'd hire a wedding singer or a cleaning service. For $80,000. To lie. To pretend. To break open the most painful scar I'd ever carried, and crawl inside it like it was a stage play. I dropped the paper and locked myself in the bathroom, hand over my mouth, rocking on the cold tile floor. I don't know how long I sat there. But I do know what I didn't do. I didn't scream. I didn't slap her. I didn't wake Leonard in a fury and demand answers. Because something had shifted in me. Something cold. Focused. Ruthless. Maybe I'd spent too long being the soft one. The one who weeps quietly. The one who forgives even when it splits her in half. But not this time. This time, I would not play the fool twice. The next morning, I made her breakfast. Waffles. Maple syrup. Berries on top. I called her down like nothing had changed. She sat across from me smiling, oblivious. "Mom, can we go through those photo albums again today?" she asked with wide, hopeful eyes. I looked at her like I was meeting her for the first time, and this time, I wasn't looking for my daughter. I was looking for the actress. The manipulator. And what I saw shocked me. Not because it was evil. But because it wasn't. She was scared. Not of me, but of being caught. I waited until Leonard left for the club. He was still playing the good husband, pretending this was all spontaneous. When the door shut, I poured her more coffee and gently slid the contract onto the table. Her eyes hit the title page and all the color drained from her face. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Then whispered, "You weren't supposed to see that." I didn't speak for a long moment. Just let the silence wrap around us like a vice. "You lied to me," I finally said, not angry. Just calm. "You stood in front of me with my child's name in your mouth. You took my grief and turned it into a costume." Tears welled in her eyes. "I needed the money." She whispered it like a prayer. "He told me it was just a role. That it wouldn't hurt you. That you'd be happy." "And what do you think now?" I asked, my voice quiet as a knife sliding into velvet. Emily, if that was even her real name, covered her face and began to sob. Not dramatic sobs. Real ones. I thought it was a job. But then, I started wishing it was true. "You looked at me like I mattered. You made me feel like I belonged." She looked up at me. "He said once the house was signed over, I could disappear. But I don't want to disappear. Not from you." And just like that, I saw the opening. I could have kicked her out. Could have taken the contract to a lawyer. Could have gone full scorched earth. But instead, I did something no one expected. I leaned forward, took her trembling hands in mine, and said, "You want redemption? Then you work for me now." Her lip quivered. "What do you mean?" "I mean I adopt you. For real. Legally. I make you my daughter. And in return, you become my spy." The silence that followed was electric. Her eyes flicked to the contract, to my face, then back again. "He'll kill me if he finds out." "No," I said. "He won't. Because by the time he does, he'll have nothing left." Emily nodded. Slowly. Like she knew this wasn't just a deal, it was the start of a war. And in that moment, the woman who was paid to ruin me became the one who would help me destroy him. The morning after we made our pact, I opened the windows and let the light in like I hadn't done in weeks. Leonard was already gone, early golf, as usual, but this time, I wasn't just watching him leave. I was taking note of his every move. Every glance. Every conversation. Because now, I wasn't alone in the dark anymore. I had Emily. Or rather, my Emily now. And whether or not she was born from my body no longer mattered. What mattered was that she was loyal now. And together, we were going to burn him slowly. We needed intel. Evidence. Something that couldn't be dismissed as bitterness or revenge. Leonard was smart, he didn't leave things lying around unless he was certain you wouldn't go looking. He used encrypted drives, locked drawers, private phones. But what he didn't count on was that the girl he hired had been trained in theater. And actresses? They know how to listen. Emily started small. She kept her phone in her back pocket, voice memos always rolling. She'd sit in the room while Leonard took calls, acting disinterested, flipping through a magazine. But she was recording everything. At night, she'd come to my room, eyes wide with adrenaline, and we'd listen together. At first, it was boring. Investments. Golf buddies. Talk of a new property in Malta. But on the fourth night, everything changed. Leonard was on the phone. His voice low, clipped. Emily had captured the whole thing. The house is nearly in both names. Once the old woman signs the trust amendment, we move the offshore assets. Emily's almost got her totally hooked. After that, she disappears. Simple. Old woman. Hooked. Disappears. I had to grip the edge of my chair to keep from screaming. Emily sat frozen beside me. She looked sick. She whispered, "He didn't say it like I mattered." Not even a little. "That's because you never did," I told her. Not to him. But to me? She was about to become his biggest threat. We moved fast after that. I told Emily to go deeper, ask questions, pretend to get nervous about the plan, see how much he'd reveal. He bought it. Completely. One night over drinks, she asked him if I'd be okay once the transfer was done. He laughed, and said, "She won't even realize what happened. I'll tell her it's for tax purposes." Old birds believe anything if you use the word financial protection enough. Old bird. The next day, I booked an appointment with a lawyer Leonard didn't know I knew. Her name was Gwen. Sharp as a tack and discreet. I told her everything. Showed her the contract. The recordings. The plan. Gwen's mouth stayed tight, but her eyes were fire. "We can nail him to the floor with this," she said. "But you need to hold. Don't tip him off. Let him keep digging his own grave." I nodded. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from restraint. I wanted to walk into Leonard's office and shove those tapes down his throat. But Gwen was right. We had to be surgical. Emily kept gathering files. One night, while Leonard slept, she cracked the passcode to his second phone. He kept it in the sock drawer, wrapped in a washcloth. Inside were photos of secret documents, PDFs of account transfers, passport scans, and purchase agreements for a condo in Malta, under a fake name. His fake name. He was planning to vanish. With my house. My money. My life. And in his mind, I was already dead. But what he didn't know was that the woman he thought he'd buried alive was wide awake and about to flip the entire game. I watched him sleep that night, Leonard, my husband, the man who shared my bed and tried to bury me with a smile. His chest rose and fell like nothing in the world was wrong. And in that moment, I realized something bone deep: monsters don't have fangs or red eyes. Sometimes, they just wear cologne and say, "Good night, sweetheart." But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that while he dreamt of Malta and offshore millions, I was downstairs with Emily and Gwen, preparing to saw the legs off the throne he thought he'd built. Freezing the offshore account wasn't simple. Gwen had pulled every string she had: contacts from her Wall Street days, a Swiss compliance expert, and a banker whose gambling debt made him cooperative. The goal? Lock the funds before Leonard could liquidate them. We had a 2-week window before the house title officially updated. 2 weeks before he disappeared for good. Emily handed over the fake name he used, David Lexner. It was one of 3 aliases Leonard used to funnel money overseas. She even found the access password buried in the Notes app on his secret phone, Win the Game 2021. Of course. He thought it was a game. We used it. Gwen's contact logged into the portal from a secure proxy and triggered a suspicious login hold under EU jurisdiction. That meant any withdrawals or transfers would be frozen for review. Leonard wouldn't even get an alert until it was too late. When the confirmation message appeared on Gwen's screen, account flagged. Funds temporarily inaccessible pending investigation, I felt something in me exhale. Not relief. Not yet. But a shift. Leonard wasn't a god. He bled like the rest of us. That night, I went back upstairs. Slid into bed beside him. He rolled toward me, draped an arm around my waist like he hadn't just tried to erase me from my own life. I didn't flinch. I let him hold me. Because in a few days, he would be holding nothing. The next morning, I baited him. Just a little. Over coffee, I said, "I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamt I was drowning, and someone I loved was holding my head underwater." He laughed. "That's morbid." I smiled. "Isn't it?" Emily kept playing her part. She cried on cue, worried about the paperwork, asked for reassurance. "We're doing the right thing, right?" she asked him while I pretended not to listen. He kissed her forehead like a proud father and said, "Soon, this will all be behind us." And that's when Gwen called with the second update. Leonard had scheduled a $300,000 transfer to an alias in the Caymans. It bounced. Flagged. He tried again. Blocked. The next evening, I watched him slam his phone on the desk, cursing under his breath. "Damned system glitch," he muttered. "I'll call the bank tomorrow." I poured him a drink. "You seem tense," I said sweetly. He downed the scotch in one gulp. "Just business." But I knew better. His kingdom was already cracking. The offshore fortress? No longer his. His fake identity? Compromised. And Emily? The daughter he hired to play me had become the weapon I never knew I needed. He'd thought he was 3 steps ahead. But now? He was running, blindfolded, toward a cliff I'd built myself. And I wasn't done. He started pacing. That was the first crack. Leonard never paced. He was a man of polished control, measured words, crisp shirts, smiles that could sell lies better than truth ever could. But the night after his offshore accounts froze and his fake name bounced back from the banks like a rejected card trick, he couldn't sit still. I watched from the hallway as he wandered his office, muttering to himself, checking the same phone screen again and again like it would eventually say what he wanted. "I need to call Rick," he hissed. Rick was his silent partner. The kind of man who lived in gray zones of legality, who helped Leonard bury assets and fabricate identities. "This doesn't make sense. Something's off." He was right. Something was off. Me. And I was about to make it worse. We needed a trigger. Something that would push Leonard into making a legal move, one I could intercept. Gwen said, "We need a document. Something fake but plausible. Something that looks like a final agreement between you, him, and Emily about property and business transfer. If we can get him to sign it without a lawyer present, that's fraud. You can file emergency reversal on the house and freeze everything in the States." So Emily wrote one. A beautifully crafted, perfectly designed, completely fake amendment. It looked like a standard trust update, listing the house, 2 properties in Vermont, and partial control of family investments to be shifted in full to Leonard and Emily upon Teresa's retirement or mental incapacity. Subtle language. Sneaky clauses. The kind of fine print you only catch if you're not drunk on greed. We placed it on his desk. Gently. Silently. A sticky note on top, lawyer said to review and sign. "Teresa's ready." Emily delivered it, wearing a sheepish smile and a lie in her throat. "Mom's been thinking about the future. She said she trusts you both now. She's scared she'll get sick like her aunt did, wanted to protect the assets ahead of time. Said if she ever loses it, she wants to know it's in good hands." Leonard stared at her for a long time. Then smiled. "I told you it would work." He actually said that. Out loud. Emily recorded it. Then, right there at the dining table, while I was asleep upstairs, he signed the fake amendment. No notary. No lawyer. No witness. Just the man who thought he was God, scribbling his own noose in ink. The next morning, Gwen filed everything. Emergency injunction. Fraudulent coercion. Preemptive asset freeze. We submitted the contract, the audio clip, and attached it all to the offshore evidence. Then, we waited. Leonard didn't even notice. Not at first. He was too busy sipping espresso and dreaming of beach houses he'd never touch. He thought everything was finally going his way. Until 2 men in navy suits knocked at our door that Friday afternoon. "Mr. Alden," one said. "You've been served." His smile collapsed. He opened the envelope. "Read the words." And for the first time since I'd known him, Leonard Alden looked afraid. He turned to me slowly and asked, "What the hell is this?" I took the paper gently from his hand, tapped the signature at the bottom, and smiled. "It's your signature, darling," I whispered. "And your mistake." The paper trembled in his hands. His eyes darted between paragraphs like he was trying to find a loophole, some tiny crack in the words where he could escape. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Leonard had always been so careful. So calculated. He thought he could play life like a game of chess where everyone else was 2 moves too slow. But now? He was checkmated, and didn't even know who put the last piece in place. I just stood there, arms folded, watching the panic bloom on his face like a disease he couldn't hide anymore. "This is garbage," he snapped, tossing the court order on the counter. "It won't hold. You forged this. I'll call a judge." "You did call a judge," I said, cutting him off. 3 years ago. Remember that charity gala in Connecticut? You bragged all night about your old friend Judge Merrill and how he owed you favors? I stepped closer. You should have been more careful with that story. Turns out Merrill's on a very interesting federal list now. And guess what, Leonard? So are you. That's when the blood drained from his face. See, while Gwen filed the property freeze and injunction, she also flagged Leonard's name through FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. That unlocked access to a database that would send red alerts to every single one of his shell companies, banks, and friends in finance. Because you can lie to a wife. But you can't lie to the government when your paper trail's sloppy. And Leonard had gotten sloppy. Emily found a list of silent donations he'd made to campaign funds in exchange for offshore blind trust access. We forwarded that list, anonymously, to the Ethics Committee of the Department of Treasury. It had 12 names. His was the first. Now he was more than a husband under investigation. He was a person of interest. He slammed a chair against the wall. You think this will stop me? You think ruining me will bring your daughter back? I tilted my head, calm as still water. She's standing right there, I said, gesturing to Emily behind him. And unlike you, she's not pretending anymore. He turned to Emily with a look I'll never forget, betrayal mixed with disbelief, like a puppet confused that its own strings had been cut. You were supposed to disappear, he said to her, voice low and venomous. We had a deal. Emily's reply was a whisper. But it was deadly. No. You had a deal. I had a job. But now. I have a mother. He stared at her for 1 second too long. Then stormed out of the room. Gwen called later that night. The house is safe, she said. The court granted you sole control pending the fraud investigation. He can't touch a dime. And once the ethics panel finishes with him, she paused. He won't even be employable. I didn't cry. Not yet. I stood on the back porch with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the last traces of sun slip behind the trees. The house was silent. Leonard was gone, maybe to one of his fake condos, maybe just to hide in the belly of his own shame. But the war wasn't over. Because now I wasn't just taking back my home. I was building a case so airtight, so surgical, that Leonard wouldn't just lose his money. He'd lose the only thing he ever truly valued, his power. He waited 2 days before slithering back into our lives. Not through the front door, Leonard had too much ego for that. No, he texted Emily. Not me. Her. At 2:17 a.m., while I slept upstairs and she curled up in the guest room that used to be mine during chemo, he messaged her like a spider weaving silk. You don't owe her anything. Let's meet. I'll explain everything. I have something for you, real this time. Not pretend. Emily brought me the phone the next morning. No makeup. No fake expressions. Just her, exposed and real in a way I'd never seen. He's trying to buy me again, she whispered. Like he did the first time. I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't need to. She already knew. She just nodded and said, I'll go. But not alone. We hatched the plan in silence. Gwen had a friend, retired FBI tech. Still had the gear. Mini recorder. Body cam. Audio feed that looped directly to Gwen's laptop in real time. Emily wore it like armor beneath a soft blue sweater Leonard had once told her made her look more innocent. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. They met at a small park 2 towns over. Neutral ground. Midday. Busy enough for safety, quiet enough for traps. I sat in Gwen's office, fingers trembling over the keyboard, watching the feed through tears I refused to let fall. Leonard looked awful. The crispness was gone. His blazer wrinkled. His hair undone. Like he hadn't slept in days, which, I hoped, he hadn't. But his mouth still smiled like a man who thought he could sell heaven with counterfeit wings. Emily, he began, his voice warm, rehearsed. I was wrong. About everything. She didn't speak. Just waited. I should have told you sooner, he continued. It wasn't just about the house. It was about her. Teresa's been unraveling for years. Paranoid. She's not well. My jaw locked. The audacity. I needed someone close to her, Leonard whispered, someone who could help ease the transition. You were perfect. But I should have protected you better. I should have given you more. So I am now. He pulled out an envelope. Fat. Cash. And something else. A new passport. A ticket. A new identity. You can start over, he said. Anywhere. You earned it. Emily looked down at the passport. The name, Lila Hart. A backstory. A full profile. Everything prearranged. All he needed was for her to vanish. She looked up, and for a second I thought she'd cry. Instead, she smiled. You know what the worst part is, Leonard? What? He asked, eager, leaning in. I wanted to believe you. Even when I knew you were evil. I wanted to think there was still a man in there worth forgiving. He blinked. Confused. But you're not a man, she said. You're a script. A soulless, manipulative script written by greed. Then she tapped her necklace. The recorder. And his entire expression crumbled. I heard it over the feed, the hitch in his breath, the curse under his voice, the scramble to grab the envelope back. But it was too late. Emily stood, dropped the passport on the bench like trash, and walked away. We submitted everything. The audio, the video, the cash for silence evidence, the fake identity, all of it. Gwen handed it directly to the Attorney General's office. Now it wasn't just a civil case. It was criminal. That night, I held Emily's hand on the porch and said the words I never thought I'd say again, I'm proud of you, daughter. And this time, it wasn't a performance. It was real. The news broke on a Monday. Quiet, at first. A headline buried beneath celebrity gossip and stock updates, local developer under investigation for fraud and identity manipulation. But by noon, the story had teeth. By sunset, it had fangs. They raided his offices first. 7 agents in black windbreakers with sealed warrants and plastic crates. They carried out boxes of fake documents, duplicate contracts, burner phones, hard drives still warm. Then came the subpoena storm, emails, texts, silent partners, the works. Leonard's face was everywhere by Tuesday morning. Smiling at old ribbon-cutting photos. Laughing beside city officials. Standing next to mayors and CEOs. And then came me. Gwen had warned me. They're going to come to you eventually. The press. The lawyers. The cameras. Be ready. I was. Because I wanted them to. It started with a local journalist, a woman named Dana Sharp. Known for digging into stories no one else wanted to touch. She showed up at my front porch with a polite knock, a trembling notebook, and tears in her eyes. I lost my daughter too, she whispered. 12 years ago. If you're willing to talk, I promise. I'll tell it right. So I let her in. I told her everything. The doorbell that changed my life. The fake daughter who became real. The husband who turned out to be a con artist in silk ties. The house. The forged contract. The offshore accounts. The trap. She didn't interrupt once. When she finally aired the interview, it wasn't flashy. It was just me, plain old Teresa Alden, sitting in a gray sweater in my kitchen, hands folded on the table. Dana asked, if Leonard were watching this right now, what would you say to him? I looked directly at the camera. And I said 2 sentences. Just 2. You used my grief to break me. But in doing so, you handed me the knife. The clip went viral. It was raw. Quiet. No screaming. No melodrama. Just one woman, broken and rebuilt, telling the world the truth with unshakable calm. Within 48 hours, 5 of Leonard's investors pulled out. His Malta condo was seized. The campaign donations he'd funneled were exposed as bribery. And the ethics panel opened a second investigation, not just for fraud, but for exploitation. Emily and I sat on the couch that night watching it all unfold. She had her head on my shoulder. We didn't cheer. We didn't cry. We just breathed. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the author. Of my life. Of my story. Of his downfall. And I was just getting started. Leonard always believed one thing above all else, that charm could fix anything. That with the right smile, the right suit, the right lawyer, he could talk his way out of hell and walk back into heaven like he never sinned. And for years, it worked. People forgave him. Believed him. Banked on him. But this time? The tide wasn't just turning. It was dragging him under. 3 days after my interview aired, Leonard filed a countersuit. The papers came through a courier with shaky hands. "Mr. Alden says this is just the beginning," the man muttered, avoiding my eyes. I opened the envelope and skimmed the first page: defamation. Character assassination. Emotional manipulation. He accused me of forging the contract. Said I used a delusional imposter to orchestrate a media hit job against him. That I was mentally unfit, possibly traumatized by the loss of my child and unmedicated grief. He even attached our wedding photos. As if that would somehow sway the court. I laughed when I saw it. Laughed so hard I dropped the papers. He really thinks he can gaslight the court, I told Gwen over the phone. He's trying to paint me as some grieving lunatic who pulled off a scam too complex for Netflix. But Gwen wasn't laughing. "We expected this," she said. "He's playing the narcissist's last card, pity. But don't worry. I've already moved the pieces." And one of those pieces was Rick. Yes, that Rick, the shady partner Leonard used for laundering deals and moving offshore funds. The same Rick who once told Leonard, "No paper trail. Ever." Well, turns out Rick had kept just enough paper trail to save himself. Because when the Treasury agents came knocking, Rick flipped. I got the news at dusk, watching the ocean from the back deck. Emily brought me her phone. "You need to see this," she said, holding out the screen. A headline blinked in bold: Leonard Alden's former business partner submits 27-page testimony in federal fraud case. I opened the article. Rick had named every scheme. Every false identity. Every fake foundation Leonard had created to bury assets and secure power. And on page 6, Rick confirmed the Emily contract. Line by line. Emily Mercer was hired under my instruction, at Leonard Alden's direction. Her identity was fabricated with knowledge of Teresa Alden's deceased child. The goal was to coerce Teresa into altering her estate planning in favor of Leonard Alden. Boom. That wasn't just evidence. That was annihilation. When Leonard found out Rick had flipped, he showed up at Rick's house at midnight, banging on the door, screaming like a man already buried alive. Rick's wife called the cops. Leonard spent the night in county jail for disturbing the peace. Oh, how the mighty fall. But here's the moment that truly sealed it. That same morning, his high-powered lawyer withdrew from the case. Filed a formal notice that Leonard had misled legal counsel. In other words, even his lawyer didn't want to be associated with the mess anymore. Now his countersuit? Dead in the water. His last ally? The man who helped him build the scam? Now the one testifying against him. And me? I sat in my kitchen, drank my tea, and circled the court date on my calendar. Because soon, Leonard wouldn't be filing lawsuits. He'd be answering for one. There's a moment before a courtroom battle where everything goes quiet. Like the hush before a thunderstorm. You don't know which direction the wind will blow, but your skin knows something's coming. That's where I was, half a heartbeat from the trial that would decide if I got my life back, or if Leonard dragged me through the dirt just one more time. Gwen was already prepping witness statements. Rick's testimony was ironclad. The judge had approved forensic audits. And Emily, sweet, brave, sharp Emily, was ready to testify as both witness and victim. But fate, it seems, wasn't done with us yet. It happened the day before the hearing. Emily was cleaning out the back garage, the old one Leonard kept locked and claimed was just full of junk. We never pushed before. Too much going on. But that day, she dropped a box of antique books, and the bottom caved in. Beneath it? A strange panel. Metal. Cold. Bolted into the concrete floor. A hidden safe. She called me, breathless. It's locked. No keypad. Just a combination. I stood frozen in the kitchen. Then I remembered something. An old anniversary card Leonard gave me years ago, tucked into a box of letters. Inside, he'd scribbled, "The day I made you mine, 041589. April 15, 1989. We tried it." The safe hissed open like it had been holding its breath for decades. And what was inside? Proof. Stacks of burner phones. USB drives. Folders labeled with names I didn't recognize until I read further. They were women. Dozens. All like me. Widows. Divorcees. Lonely. Each folder included photos, bank account transfers, forged letters of inheritance. Leonard had done this before. Emily whispered, "Oh my God, we weren't his first scam. We were just his last." There were audio tapes too. One of them, dated just 6 months ago, recorded a conversation between Leonard and Rick. "The beauty of using grief is it's clean. You're not stealing from someone alive, you're collecting what they're not strong enough to hold anymore." My blood ran cold. We weren't just exposing fraud now. We were unearthing a predator. We called Gwen. She drove over in 20 minutes flat, gloves on, bag in hand, documenting everything. "This," she said, holding up the drives, "just turned your case into a federal takedown." And suddenly, I saw the trial not as a battle to survive, but a chance to burn the rot from the root. The next morning, I stood in the mirror smoothing my blazer, buttoning the sleeves with trembling fingers. But I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I looked into my own eyes and whispered, "He used your pain to steal. Now use his lies to win." Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered like bees. Flashbulbs popped. Emily squeezed my hand. Gwen walked beside us like a blade in human form. And Leonard? He showed up 10 minutes late. No tie. Eyes sunken. No wife. No allies. No armor. Because the truth was already halfway through the courtroom doors. And once the judge heard what we had, there'd be no coming back for him. You can feel power shift in a room when truth enters like a gust of wind through locked windows. That's what happened the moment I stepped into that courtroom. It was sterile, white walls, oak benches, a judge who barely blinked. But beneath it all, you could feel the pressure building. Leonard sat at the defendant's table, pretending to scribble notes, his lawyer replaced by a fresh-faced man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't look at me. Not once. Cowards don't. The judge called the session to order. Gwen rose first, calm and composed, and gave the opening statement that began not with fraud or property, but with grief. She spoke about how loss is not just personal, it's exploitable. And how Leonard Alden had turned a woman's private mourning into a stage show, hiring an actress to pretend to be her long-lost daughter in order to manipulate her into giving up her estate. There was a gasp in the courtroom. Someone in the back whispered, "He what?" And then it was Emily's turn. She walked slowly to the stand. Not nervous. Not afraid. Just real. She told them everything. The audition. The contract. The rehearsals. The briefings. The payment schedule. The lies. But then she told them something else. That woman, she said, pointing to me, wasn't supposed to love me. I was just a tool. But she looked at me like I was hers. Like I mattered. She didn't buy it. She believed it. And after a while, I did too. There were tears in the jury box. Leonard? He scoffed. Crossed his arms. But when it was Gwen's turn again, she stepped to the center of the courtroom and said 6 words I'll never forget. Your Honor, we have one more witness. She gestured to me. I stood. The walk to the witness chair felt slow, but my spine was straight. Gwen placed a small voice recorder on the table in front of me. May I, she asked the judge. He nodded. And then, she pressed play. Leonard's voice filled the courtroom. The beauty of using grief is it's clean. You're not stealing from someone alive, you're collecting what they're not strong enough to hold anymore. People gasped. The bailiff's eyes widened. Leonard lunged forward. That's doctored. That's fake. But Gwen was already holding up the forensic authentication report. Verified by a federal lab. Untouched. Pure. And there are 13 more tapes just like it. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Alden, sit down. But Leonard couldn't stop unraveling. He was shouting now. She was never even a real daughter. She's an actress. A liar. I looked at him, calm as the eye of a hurricane, and said, she was your lie, Leonard. But she became my truth. And then I stood. I handed over the documents from the safe. All of them. The other women. The forged wills. The funneling of stolen inheritances. This wasn't just a mistake, Your Honor, Gwen said, her voice like iron. This was a blueprint. And we're not the only victims. Silence. The judge looked down at Leonard. I'm issuing an immediate seizure of all remaining assets. Federal investigators will follow with criminal charges. Leonard didn't yell this time. He just sat there, frozen. Because for the first time in his life, his charm couldn't save him. And the truth? Had finally spoken louder. The courthouse doors hadn't even closed behind us before the world caught fire. That recording, Leonard's venom-soaked words about grief being a clean theft, made headlines within hours. A clip of Emily's testimony went viral overnight, shared by grief support pages, survivor forums, even legal blogs. But what I didn't expect were the messages. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. They came in through email, social media, handwritten letters delivered to Gwen's office. Women from Illinois, Connecticut, Georgia, even one from Spain. They weren't just reacting to the story, they were living it. He promised to help me invest after I lost my husband, then disappeared with my savings. He claimed to be honoring his brother's last wishes. Said the land belonged to me. It never did. I thought I was the only one. I read each one like it was written in blood. Different names, different settings, but all echoed the same horror. Leonard Alden had turned sorrow into a business model. And now, it was collapsing. The Ethics Board released an official statement. We are pursuing further investigation into Mr. Alden's past transactions and are actively seeking other potential victims. Gwen forwarded it to me with one line, you started a movement. But I didn't feel victorious yet. Not really. The world knew the truth now, yes. But I still woke up some nights to echoes of Leonard's lies. His laughter behind closed doors. The paper he made me sign. The face Emily made the first night she called me Mom. Still, I got out of bed every morning. I made tea. I opened the windows. I walked the garden. And slowly, painfully, the house stopped feeling like a stage where I'd been manipulated and started feeling like mine again. One afternoon, I got a call. It was Dana Sharp, the journalist who first told my story. "I know it's still fresh," she said, "but people want to hear from you again. You gave them hope." I didn't say yes immediately. But a week later, I found myself sitting in front of a camera again, same kitchen, same soft light. No makeup. No script. Just me. She asked, "What would you tell someone who thinks they're being deceived, but can't prove it yet?" I looked into the lens and said, "Trust your grief. It knows when something doesn't feel right. And don't let anyone tell you that pain makes you gullible. Sometimes, pain makes you the sharpest one in the room." That quote hit headlines again. This time, not as evidence, but as anthem. Meanwhile, Leonard's mugshot was released. Disheveled. Pale. Bitter. His bond hearing was denied. One of his former investors sued him privately for $3.4 million. His Malta property was auctioned for half its worth. But the best part? That wasn't even my doing. It was the other women. They'd formed a group, called themselves the Widowed Truth. They were filing a class action suit. And they wanted me to lead it. I didn't accept immediately. But that night, Emily stood beside me on the porch, watching the moonlight hit the garden we'd replanted together. "You always said you weren't strong," she said softly. "But look around, Mom. Everything still standing is because of you." And in that moment, I realized Leonard hadn't just failed to destroy me. He'd built the very voice that would echo through the lives of every woman he'd hurt. The trial opened on a Thursday morning, the kind where the sky can't decide if it wants to storm or shine. The courthouse was different this time. Heavier. Packed. The front steps were a sea of news cameras, protesters holding signs, former investors flanking both sides like ghosts returned for vengeance. But inside was where the real reckoning began. They brought Leonard in through a side door, handcuffed and pale. His once pristine suits were replaced with a wrinkled gray jacket. He looked older. Smaller. Like a man who'd spent the past 2 weeks watching his name collapse beneath the weight of every lie he'd ever told. The judge was federal now. No nonsense. Female. Which Leonard clearly didn't expect. The prosecution presented first. Evidence after evidence. Testimonies from women who'd never even met each other until now. They came forward with bank statements, emails, handwritten notes, and tears that still hadn't dried after 10, 15, even 20 years. Some had given him money. Some had signed documents. Some had just trusted a smile that never reached the eyes. Emily sat beside me, fingers gripping mine like a lifeline. Gwen nodded every time a victim stood and reclaimed their story. But the courtroom didn't truly shift until they called me. I stood slowly. Walked forward in silence. Leonard watched me. But not like before. No smirk. No manipulation. Just fear. I took the witness stand. Gwen approached slowly. "Ms. Alden," she said, her voice steady, "can you tell us why you're here today?" I looked down for a second. Then lifted my gaze. Not at the jury. Not at the cameras. At him. Because he underestimated grief, I said quietly. He thought loss made me weak. That love, especially the kind that outlives a child, was something he could use like a tool. But what he didn't understand is that grief isn't weakness. It's memory with muscle. The courtroom went still. I could feel their breath catch. Gwen didn't interrupt. I continued, he didn't just steal from bank accounts. He stole stories. Moments. Final wishes. He wrapped his hands around the most broken parts of people and squeezed until he found profit. I held up a photo of the music box Emily had brought the night she arrived. This was never mine. He planted it. Told her what to say. How to cry. But here's the truth, Your Honor, sometimes the lies we're told become the bridges we need to walk across. The judge nodded slightly. Gwen stepped in with one final question. And what would justice mean to you? I looked at Leonard and said, justice isn't about seeing him behind bars. It's about every woman he wronged knowing it wasn't their fault. It's about truth finally being louder than charm. That was it. I stepped down. Sat beside Emily again. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman's voice didn't shake. On all counts of fraud, coercion, identity manipulation, and financial abuse, we find the defendant guilty. Leonard didn't cry. He didn't beg. He just lowered his head, like he knew the empire he built on broken hearts had finally been buried by the very people he tried to erase. The judge ordered immediate remand. No bail. Sentencing in 30 days. And just like that, it was done. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because while his chapter was closed, mine was just starting to rewrite itself. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. No seal. Just my name, handwritten, small and sharp like someone pressing too hard with the pen. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. I could feel the manipulation like static crawling over my skin. Leonard. He was in county lockup, awaiting sentencing. No more silk suits. No more boardroom applause. Just cold floors and a toilet 2 feet from his cot. Gwen had warned me, men like him don't go quietly. They go with stories. With smoke. With ink. Still. I opened it. It started like every narcissist's last monologue, Teresa, I hope this reaches you in peace. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted to tell my side before the court decides my future. I loved you, in my own broken way. Everything I did, yes, even Emily, was out of fear of losing control. And maybe, a desperate kind of love. I nearly tore it in half right there. But something stopped me. Because the next line said this, check the garden. Behind the azaleas. One last thing I never told you. I stared at the letter for minutes. Was it another trap? Another mind game? But curiosity is a cruel thing. It lives where logic dies. So I went outside. The garden had become my haven again, mine and Emily's. We'd replanted tulips, herbs, lavender. I'd started to feel safe there. But now? I crouched behind the azaleas with gloved hands and a thundering heart. And what I found made me sick. A rusted tin box, wrapped in plastic. Inside, old photos. Receipts. A key. And a letter, dated 10 years ago. It was from another woman. Her name was Cynthia. The letter was addressed to Leonard. You said once the house was in my name, we'd be together. But you never came. You took everything and disappeared. I told you I was pregnant. I never heard back. The key had an address on it. An apartment in Maine. I dropped to my knees in the dirt. Leonard hadn't just conned me. He hadn't just built scams on grieving widows. He'd been doing it even before me. Promising women love, family, protection, and vanishing with their futures in his briefcase. I brought the box to Gwen. Her face went pale as she read. This changes everything, she whispered. We can reopen past cases. Possibly even press federal charges for past fraud. But me? I wasn't thinking about courtrooms. I was thinking about Cynthia. About a woman who believed in the same smile I once trusted. Who may have been left to raise a child alone, while Leonard played house with the next lie on his list. I burned the letter he sent me. But I kept hers. Because it wasn't a love note. It was evidence. Of how far his cruelty went. Of how many graves he tried to dig with charm. And now? I was going to make sure Cynthia's story, and every woman like her, was no longer buried. The key had been haunting me for days. I kept it tucked in my jewelry box, next to the locket Leonard gave me on our first anniversary, a locket I now realized he probably picked up from a discount bin while plotting his next scam. But the key, it had weight. Meaning. History. And questions I couldn't ignore. So I packed a small bag. Told Emily I'd be gone overnight. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. I nodded. I had to. Not for Leonard. For Cynthia. For every woman who'd been used, erased, discarded like a prop in his act. The drive to Maine was 6 hours. Quiet, long stretches of road with nothing but my thoughts, and the soft sound of Emily's playlist in my car speakers. I pulled into the address from the tin box just before dusk. It was a worn-down duplex with chipped siding and a rusted mailbox that leaned like it had given up decades ago. I didn't expect anyone to answer. But when I knocked, the door creaked open, and there she was. Older than the letter implied. Mid-60s. Thin. Sharp-eyed. And when she saw me holding that key, her face changed, like she'd seen a ghost. "You're not him," she said. "No," I replied. "But I know him. And I think he knew you." She let me in. Slowly. No words at first, just silence and the smell of old wood and dust. Her living room was small, filled with books and plants and faded photos. One in particular caught my eye, a teenage boy with dark curls and green eyes that punched the air from my lungs. "Is that?" I whispered. "My son," Cynthia said. "He's 28 now. Name's Benjamin." I raised him alone. I sat down slowly. "Leonard knew?" "Oh, he knew," she said bitterly. "I told him. Sent letters. Emails. Even tracked him down once. He sent me $500 and a note that said, 'For your silence.' That was it." I felt sick. She poured tea. Her hands were steady. Strong. "I used to think I was stupid," she continued. "For falling for him. For believing him. But then I found others. Online. Women with similar stories. Widows. Divorcees. All charming, all temporary. Always gone before the dust settled." That's when I told her everything. The fake daughter. The forged contract. The court case. The tapes. She listened. Silent. Still. And when I finished, she said, "He used grief like a scalpel. But you turned it into a sword." We talked for hours. About love. Loneliness. Survival. She showed me old photos of Leonard, before me, before the suits. In one of them, he was 25. Standing outside a church. Holding a woman's hand. Only it wasn't Cynthia. Or me. It was someone else. And on the back of the photo, scribbled in his handwriting, "Third time's the charm." I stared at it, stunned. He's been doing this longer than we ever knew. Leonard never loved anyone, Cynthia said. He only loved what people would give him when they thought he did. I left the next morning with a folder of old letters, bank slips, and photos, Cynthia's quiet proof. She hugged me before I left. "You're not just taking him down for you," she said. "You're doing it for all of us." And she was right. When I got back to town, I called Gwen. "There are more victims," I told her. "We need to go deeper." Because Leonard Alden hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen histories. And now, piece by piece, I was reclaiming them all. I never set out to become a symbol. I was just a woman with a broken past, a cracked heart, and a stolen home. But when I returned from Cynthia's house, carrying 30 years of silence in a manila folder, something inside me shifted. No more courtrooms built on whispers. No more waiting for the system to connect the dots. If Leonard Alden had spent decades collecting women to silence, then I would spend the rest of mine helping them speak. The first thing I did was send Dana Sharp, my journalist ally, everything Cynthia gave me. The letters. The bank slips. The third woman photo. Dana's response was instant: I want to do a series. Not just your story. All of them. You lead it. I agreed. But I didn't stop there. I launched a quiet campaign: private Facebook groups, trauma survivor forums, grief support threads, even a section on Gwen's legal website. Were you ever contacted by Leonard Alden? The response was overwhelming. Within 2 weeks, 37 women reached out. Different cities. Different decades. Same pattern. Same lies. Same empty promises. Some had lost homes. Some had signed power of attorney. One woman named Evelyn had married him for 3 years, before she accidentally fell down a flight of stairs and lost partial memory. He didn't just exploit grief. He engineered it. We compiled everything. Gwen and Dana worked side by side, building a victim-led dossier thicker than most novels. And then came the phone call from 60 Minutes. We'd like to profile your case, the producer said. Not just for its legal merit, but for its human weight. This man didn't just break laws. He broke people. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, if it helps even one woman not fall for another Leonard, I'll do it. The segment aired 3 Sundays later. It was raw, unfiltered. Voices layered over mine. Cynthia spoke. Evelyn did too. Even Emily, her face half-shadowed, told the world, he hired me to fake love. But the woman he tried to manipulate became the only mother I've ever had. When the episode ended, there was silence. Then chaos. Social media exploded. Newspapers followed. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for the widowed. Hashtag Alden Files. Hashtag her grief his game Leonard. Oh, he noticed. His legal team filed a motion to silence media coverage. Denied. 2 more women came forward from Europe. 1 from Australia. The DOJ opened an international review. And the cherry on top? The court approved a new charge: organized emotional exploitation for financial gain. A first of its kind. Crafted from the blueprint of our case. Emily and I sat at the kitchen table that night, watching the news. They played a clip of me saying, he used grief like a scalpel, but I turned it into a sword. She smiled. They're quoting you, Mom. You're being studied in law schools. I laughed. A real one. Because Leonard's empire, built on manipulation, lies, and charm, had been replaced by a network of women who refused to stay silent. And the trial that was coming next? Wasn't just about punishing him. It was about rewriting the laws in our names. It was the biggest courtroom I'd ever seen. Polished floors. Federal seals carved into the walls. Cameras outside. Rows upon rows of observers inside, reporters, legal scholars, survivors, daughters, sisters, faces he'd forgotten but who never forgot him. Leonard Alden was being tried not just for fraud, but for something larger. Something that didn't even exist in the law books until we created it: emotional exploitation for financial gain. A phrase born from our wounds, and carved into legal precedent by our resistance. The bailiff called, "All rise." And when Leonard entered in his faded orange jumpsuit and shackled ankles, he finally looked like the man he truly was: small. He shuffled in, eyes scanning the crowd. And slowly, painfully, you could see it dawn on him that every woman in that room was someone he had taken something from. A home. A name. A future. And now, they'd come to take something back. He saw Cynthia, sitting just behind me. Evelyn, her neck scar peeking out from her blouse. The woman from Spain. The woman from Australia. Emily, beside me in a soft gray dress, holding my hand like she was born to do it. His jaw tensed. His shoulders curled inward. And for the first time, Leonard didn't look smug. Or calculating. Or in control. He looked terrified. The prosecution opened with fire. "This is not a case of bad business," the lawyer said. "This is a case of manufactured grief. A system of deception built on women's pain. Mr. Alden did not just find victims, he designed them." Then came the testimony. One after another. Women who'd been convinced to sign away houses, trust funds, retirement accounts. Women who'd been widowed for weeks, months, years, targeted precisely for their loneliness. A nurse who lost her husband in a car crash. A woman who'd been swindled just days after her mother's funeral. A cancer survivor who gave Leonard her emergency inheritance because he said he could turn it into a legacy. Each one stood, shook slightly, then spoke with thunder. But the moment the courtroom cracked open was when Emily took the stand again. She looked Leonard dead in the eye and said, "You paid me to fake love." And I did. At first. But then I realized real love can't be faked. What Teresa gave me. What every woman in this room gave back to themselves. That was real. And you will never, ever know what that feels like. Leonard looked down. Then the judge turned to me. "Ms. Alden," she said. "Do you have anything further to add?" I stood. Walked slowly to the front of the room. No tears. No notes. Just me. I turned to face the room, not Leonard. The women. My sisters in survival. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "He doesn't get to have that power anymore. I'm here so the world can see what women look like when they stand together. I'm here so grief isn't used as a weapon again. I'm here because we turned his empire of silence into a courtroom full of voices." There was silence. Then the judge spoke. "I have heard enough." She pounded the gavel. "Guilty. On all counts." Leonard's sentence would be formalized in the coming weeks. But we already knew, he was never walking free again. And as he was led out in chains, he turned back one last time. His eyes scanned the room again, still looking for control. But this time, he found legacy. And it didn't belong to him. It belonged to us. They sentenced him on a Wednesday. The kind of day where the sky hangs low and heavy, like it knows it's about to witness something final. Leonard stood before the judge in shackles and state-issued gray. The charm was gone. The mask had melted. Even his posture, the tall, smug arrogance he'd worn like cologne, had collapsed into something brittle and small. The courtroom was quiet. No cameras this time. Just victims, survivors, and the gavel that would seal his fate. The judge's words were measured, but they cut like glass. "You preyed on vulnerability and grief as tools for manipulation. You orchestrated decades of deception under the guise of care. This court finds you guilty of 38 counts of fraud, 14 counts of identity coercion, and a new precedent of emotional exploitation for financial gain. You are hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison, without parole." Leonard didn't flinch. Didn't speak. But I saw it, the twitch in his jaw. The realization that time, for once, wasn't on his side. 35 years. He'd be an old man, if he lived that long. And even then, there'd be no money, no name, no mask left to wear. He didn't look at me as they led him away. He looked down. Like a man who finally understood what it meant to be erased. And as the doors closed behind him, there wasn't applause. No cheers. Just a long, collective exhale. A silence filled with something more powerful than noise, closure. I thought that would be the end of the story. But fate had one more twist. 3 days later, I received a call from the State Attorney General's office. A woman named Alina, sharp voice, clear purpose. "Mrs. Alden," she said, "we're creating a new committee. A coalition to fight financial grooming, especially against widows, grieving families, and emotionally vulnerable individuals. We want you to chair it. I froze. Me? Yes. You changed the way we look at emotional fraud. You didn't just survive it, you gave others the language to fight it. We want your voice. Your story. Your strength. I didn't answer right away. I sat on my porch with the phone in my lap, watching the wind move through the garden. Emily joined me with 2 mugs of tea and said, if they're building a better system, it should start with someone who knows what it feels like to be broken by the old one. So I said yes. Not for revenge. That part was over. I said yes for Cynthia. For Evelyn. For every woman who sent me a letter saying, I thought it was just me. And on the day they swore me in, I wore the same gray sweater I'd worn in the courtroom, the one I testified in. The one I had cried in. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means standing exactly where they tried to ruin you, and building something stronger. It came on a rainy morning. One of those soft drizzles that feels more like a whisper than a storm. I was sitting by the window with Emily, sipping tea, the scent of lemon balm rising in the air, when the doorbell rang. Just a quiet chime. I opened the door and found a courier standing there with a manila envelope, rain speckling his shoulders. Signature, please, he said. No explanation. No sender listed. I signed. Closed the door. And just stood there staring at it. My heart started racing. Because something about the weight in my hand felt different. Emily watched me from the kitchen. What is it? She asked. I don't know, I whispered. I opened the envelope. Inside, a letter. Yellowed paper. Neatly folded. With a return address I didn't recognize, a Catholic hospital in Wisconsin. My breath caught. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers trembling. And the very first line shattered me. To the mother who never held me, I sank into the chair. The world swayed for a moment as I read the rest. It was dated 1993. For years after I was told my baby girl had died. Her name had been Clara. She had survived. Barely. Premature. Transferred in secret. Records sealed due to complications. A nurse, a whistleblower, later fired, had tried to contact me. The letter was never sent. It had been buried in the hospital's sealed archives. Until the hospital was shut down last year. And this letter resurfaced. Clara had lived. She was adopted. Raised in Minnesota. She searched for me once, briefly, in her 20s, but gave up when she found no trace. She said she didn't hate me, but always wondered why I never looked for her. The final paragraph read, if this ever reaches you, I want you to know, I have children now. A good life. And I forgive you. Even if we never meet, I hope you've been loved. I couldn't breathe. I pressed the letter to my heart like I could somehow time travel and hold her in my arms. My baby. My real baby. Emily was crying. Do you want to find her? I nodded slowly. Yes. But not to explain. Just to let her know I always looked. Even when I didn't know what I was looking for. We reached out to the contact listed in the archive's forwarding note. And within days, we had a phone number. I called. Hands trembling. Voice shaking. A woman answered. Soft. Warm. Familiar in a way only blood can explain. Hello? Is this Clara? I whispered. A pause. Yes. Who is this? It's Teresa. Your mother. Silence. Then, sobs. We spoke for 3 hours that night. And when I told her everything, about Leonard, about Emily, about the courtroom and the trap and the betrayal, she said, I think the universe gave you a daughter when you needed one, until I could come back." Emily smiled through her tears. "I'm still yours," she said. "Even if she's real. I'm real too." And she was. I didn't lose a daughter. I gained two. One born in pain. The other born in truth. And both mine. Before I share this final chapter with you, I just want to say, if this story found you at the right time, please subscribe my channel. And tell me in the comments, where are you from? I'd love to know who's listening. The sun was warm that day. Not blazing. Not blinding. Just warm. Like it knew what was about to happen and wanted to bless it quietly. I stood in the arrivals terminal at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, holding a bouquet of blue hydrangeas and shaking so hard I thought I'd drop them. Emily stood beside me, calm as ever. "She's real," she whispered. "Just breathe." And then I saw her. Clara. My daughter. She was taller than I imagined. Wavy brown hair. Same dimple I saw in the mirror every day of my youth. Her eyes were mine. But there was something more, something peaceful. Like she hadn't come to accuse or question. She had come home. When our eyes met, we didn't speak. Not right away. We just held each other. 34 years collapsed in that embrace. And when she finally pulled back, tears sliding down both our faces, she said, "I always knew I wasn't unwanted. Just misplaced." We spent 3 days together. No courtrooms. No press. Just a lake house I rented for the reunion. Clara brought photos of her children. I brought old lullabies she never heard. And Emily? She stayed beside us, never jealous, never distant. Just present. "I don't feel replaced," Emily said one night as we all sat around the fire pit. "I feel like we were always meant to find each other. Even if it started as a lie." Clara nodded. "You were the truth that held her up until I got here." And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe it. That maybe I hadn't been cursed. Maybe the universe hadn't punished me. Maybe it just rerouted me. When Clara flew home, she kissed my forehead and said, "Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere." Neither was Emily. And neither was I. Weeks later, I sat once again in front of a camera. Dana Sharp had invited me for one last interview, a follow-up to the viral story that broke everything open. "What's the legacy you hope to leave behind?" she asked. I looked into the lens, at you, whoever you are, wherever you are, and said, "They'll tell you that grief makes you easy to manipulate. That heartbreak makes you desperate. That love makes you foolish. But I am standing here, strong, steady, surrounded by daughters, not because I avoided betrayal, but because I survived it." I paused. Then I said, "And to every woman who's been lied to, discarded, gaslit, or broken, your voice is your revenge. Your truth is enough. Say it. Speak it. Show them you're still standing." The video broke 1 million views in 24 hours. But I didn't watch the numbers anymore. I watched Emily planting lavender in the garden. I watched Clara sending postcards from her travels with her kids. I watched the sun filter through the window of a house I almost lost. But never did. Because I remembered who I was. And now the world does too. If you've ever been made to feel small, silenced, or scammed, let this story be proof. Your story is not over. You still get to choose how it ends. Comment below, where are you from? Did this story touch something inside you? Subscribe my channel for more stories of betrayal, survival, and powerful comebacks.